Hi, everybody, and welcome to SolveTank, the SaaSOps Live virtual event, where we are having our second episode in this format. Obviously, we normally have every other week, we have our collection of SaaSOps professionals where we discuss popular topics in SaaSOps. But this week, we are doing episode number 2 of SolveTank, where we get a SaaS application on, and they give us a demo, and then we ask some questions. They give us some good answers, hopefully, and then we're going to evaluate them and sort of hypothetically say whether we could see it as a fit for our operation. Obviously, it is all hypothetical. There will be no POs, there will be no purchase orders or quotes being signed today, but you never know what follow-ups questions there will be or discussions afterward. It is my pleasure to welcome Barak and Kelsey from Cintello. That's Cintello.io, and they are the intelligent platform to manage the lifecycle of your software applications. So, Barak, over to you.
A mouthful, isn't it? Thank you, Colin, for having us and including us. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces, many of you who I consider friends, and some new faces who I don't know. And if you're watching this at some point in the future on YouTube, I hope the world's in a great place. So good for you in the future. Also, Shark Tank does end with deals. So if any of you want to send purchase orders, or I could send your purchase order right after this, really don't hold Colin to that. Like it can definitely lead to real ones. Don't sell yourself short. I'm gonna keep the slides to a minimum and really just go through a high-level product demo. We only have kind of 20 minutes and then Q&A. So during the Q&A, I can go deeper into any of the existing functionality or go back to the slides, which I don't see us doing, but maybe we will. This beautiful kind of summary graph and data actually comes from BetterCloud. It comes from BetterCloud's survey of all of you in terms of how you think about your software stack and how many of you are actually SaaS first organizations. And I think it's not a surprise to any of you that SaaS is the new business operating system. We live in SaaS applications. Our businesses are built in SaaS applications. Your entire workforce works in these SaaS applications. And what that means to us and the way that we think about it is it's a huge opportunity for IT leaders and other members of the SaaS SWAT team to enable their employees to help their businesses grow in ways that maybe was overlooked in the past. And we're excited at Cintello to play a small part. And the small part that we try to help with is to make this all a lot more manageable. The problem that Cintello solves is SaaS sprawl, right? The two words that kind of can sum this up is SaaS sprawl. What happens as a result of that SaaS sprawl is your day-to-days, right? If you probably looked at this past week and what you spent time doing, it's wrangling the different applications. It's the managing all the renewals and the spend. It's understanding the shadow IT and the long tail of applications that employers are signing up for on their own. It's the whole employee enablement side of onboarding and offboarding and getting access to applications. And Jane and many of her counterparts are tasked with managing this. And Cintello really is where we come in is to try to help with this, right? So we know this is significant. We know there's problems. Going to kind of skip that part and talk about the actual solution from an Cintello perspective. The way that we think about SaaS management, SaaSOps, and what it means to Cintello and why it is very much complementary to BetterCloud and other solutions that some of you might be familiar with, is because we're very focused on that SaaS sprawl problem and how to solve the SaaS sprawl problem across 3 major vectors. We'll call it the optimized vector, the secure, and the enable. Right. So step 1 in terms of where Cintello comes in is discovering all your applications automatically in real time on a daily basis. So going very wide in terms of application footprint and users, but also going as deep as we can in terms of the insights of how those applications are being used and the details about the different licenses. And I'll show you what that means in just a second. The second part, once you get kind of visibility into all your applications, is creating that management and optimization layer, right? So you need a centralized place to manage this so that you can then work on those optimization tasks, like work with Josh in procurement or whoever else you might be working with to make sure that you're recouping your spend and on top of a lot of the spend. But it actually doesn't stop there. And a lot of people, I'd say, more outsiders, less so our clients, kind of think of Intello as spend management. We don't. We think of it as SaaS management, and we think about it across these three vectors, because after optimize, you still have a major security kind of challenge. You still have shadow IT. You still have, on a daily basis, employees signing up for their own applications. You still have access control audits that you have to do regularly for onboard and offboard users, and tracking the permissions into those applications. You have third-party apps getting access to data that they may not have been approved for. You're trying to get more behind your single sign-on, right? So there's a lot of these security challenges that come up as a result of SaaS sprawl that Intello helps with as well. And then the third vector kind of like the core piece that we're continuing to invest in is this whole employee enablement side. Right, the best IT organizations, the mission statement is helping the organization grow and making sure that employees are efficient and enabled and can be productive in their day-to-day. And especially nowadays with at least a quasi-remote workforce for many of us, this is more and more important. And we view Intello playing a pretty major part in that. I'm going to skip over the rest of these slides, and I'm happy to come back to any of them at a later date. How does Intello work? How do we do the whole discovery side? It's very much on a, we very much have a product-led approach, right? The way that we think about everything at Intello is we want to make it as easy for you to get set up and as quick to get the value that you're looking to get. We never replace existing solutions. Really, I don't want to say never, but very, very rarely. And therefore, the challenge for many of you that hopefully will leave this feeling excited is you still got to go create budget. And there's other people that you need to go convince to go get that budget. And at Intello, we try to make it as easy as possible by building the solution to let you get set up really quickly, to let you get those insights really quickly, and to be able to start getting value before you even have to spend $1 on Intello through a proof of value. And our integration-based approach is how we do that. We have over 50 integrations. And the reason we have such a large integration catalog is because it's very specific data that we're getting from these different integrations. So I'm actually gonna start at the back and kind of work my way forward. So from a spend side, we integrate with your ERP, expense management, 10,000 plus credit cards. We can go through CSV upload if for some reason we don't support your ERP, or you might be using a on-prem version. The way that these spend integrations work is at Intello, we have a machine learning engineering team who built a spend parsing algorithm that pulls from the raw payment data as to the vendor name, and we'll pull in every software purchase. So what this really means, and this is really important, is that it doesn't matter how the payments are categorized. Our goal is to surface all the software spend for our clients. So an example is a soon to IPO internet company who's a client of ours set up the Expensify integration at Intello. And at first they were actually combative about this. She's the head of IT there and actually didn't think she needed to set up the Expensify integration because they have a lot of policies in place around how you're allowed to purchase, and they don't even have a category for software in Expensify. It's mostly travel. But we set it up just in case, and we found $1.5 million a year on just a long tail of software that was being expensed to all the wrong categories. I'd say mostly probably not maliciously. It's just people needed to access the tools, and that's how they went about it. Probably in some cases it was malicious, but it's a significant challenge, right? So the visibility from the spend side, all of the spend data that we pull in come from these financial integrations. They do not come from those direct integrations. But we do have direct integrations. Now, what the direct integrations will pull is a lot of the deeper kind of usage data. Who's got access to a license, who's actually using that license, and as much of the metadata as we can expose to you to be able to make decisions off of. So the direct integrations are a really kind of rich source of utilization data that we also encourage our clients to set up. And it only they're almost all OAuth based. So one-click integrations, you just need to be the admin. The second source of data for us, and actually I'm just going to skip into the product because of the limited time. The second source, so we have direct integrations, right? Where we're pulling in the data. Try not to get too distracted by all the other numbers, but just kind of know over here you can see the sources. So we have direct integrations. We have single sign-on integrations with Okta, OneLogin, G Suite SSO, Azure AD to pull in the logins behind any of your core applications. So especially for applications that you're enforcing login through your single sign-on, we're going to capture every login. Now we can't go deeper than that through the single sign-on, which is why we still have the direct integrations, because sometimes you do want deeper engagement data, deeper license data, but we can give you a pretty good high-level picture through the single sign-on solution as to what are the connected applications and how are they being used. We have other sources though. We integrate into the MDM products like Jamf. Jamf is actually a Intello client that uses our Jamf integration to surface their install base application. So with the Jamf integration, we'll pull in what are the applications that are actually installed on the different devices, like the Adobe licenses and JetBrains and Office 365, who's got access and who's actually using that. And then there's a lot of other ways we pull it in. Authentications, for example, if any employers are signing up for or signing into applications through G Suite, O365, or even Slack, we'll pull those in and we'll capture a lot of the shadow IT footprint. So this usage data is obviously really helpful, but in isolation, it doesn't necessarily give you all the information you need to make decisions, which is why we also combine that with the spend data that we get from the financial integrations. And we try to surface all the different sources of where this data is pulling in from. So if we go into an example of how you would actually utilize this data to hopefully get value, you can see Zoom, right? And you can see how your Zoom licenses are trending and are in use over time. Now, the usage data, the most I'd say like obvious way to use this is to optimize licenses or costs. But one of the ways that we've seen clients get a ton of success is actually to go justify an enterprise purchase, to go show, hey, since COVID, look at our Zoom usage. I know that, you know, we're a Google shop and have been trying to, you know, stay cost conscious because of we have access to Google Hangouts, Google Meet, but like our users are asking for it, they're using it. Not only that, we want to actually understand who are those users, who are the ones that are most engaged and how are they using it. And obviously, you know, you need to have a Zoom enterprise in order for us to pull it in from Zoom, but you can also pull it, let's say, from G Suite. How many users of your organization have signed up to Zoom through your G Suite and are authing in through your corporate G Suite account? And you can slice and dice this data in any way you want. You can set up multiple instances. You can look at different filters. You can run usage reports for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 1 year. For those of you that are clients who might not have even seen this view, this is a relatively new filter that you can play with. And we're also suggesting actions that you can take. So let's talk about that security use case. Let's say you want to see your Zoom users that are live in Zoom but are no longer live in Okta, or live in Zoom and no longer live in G Suite. We now have these suggested, and we don't have any in this instance, but we now have these suggested filters that you can actually see who are those users that might have failed the rule-based engines that you've set up, right? And you'd be surprised, I'd say 98% of our clients, there's like one exception I can think of where they really had no users that have hung through, and it's usually for the most ridiculous reasons. The skim integration broke, or when some user was changing, there was some taxonomy that you didn't consider. So there's a lot of different ways to use this data and a lot of different filters and reports that you can pull. We also pull in the department-based data. So if you're using Okta or OneLogin, you can set that as your source of truth. And then based on the users and their corresponding teams and departments, look at that utilization data in different ways and pull different reports based off of it. So there's a lot of ways to use this data. There's a lot of reports that you can pull, and it helps across spend optimization, the security and compliance use cases, as well as the employee enablement side. Just very quickly, I'm going to be mindful of the time and try to finish up in 5 minutes and then answer just questions. We also have the Spreadsheet Killer View, right? The Spreadsheet Killer View is a way for you to collaborate with your colleagues and your SaaS SWAT teams to track all of your applications. Now, we'll do a lot of that discovery automatically through the financial integrations. We'll do some high-level categorization. You could probably go deeper there, but it's a little high level right now. You can manage the renewal dates and get notifications ahead of renewal dates. You can track licenses, provision users, but then you can make this your own. You can create any field you dream of, right? We have a bunch of just examples here, like the criticality, the risk level, what kind of PII data does it have? You can store the actual contracts and SLAs. You can link to third-party kind of sources. Does it have customer data? We have customers that are software companies themselves and have a filter to see, are they also a client of our company? Right. So there's a lot of ways that you can just make this your own, and everything we do in Intello is with the idea that each SaaS SWAT team is built differently, and each of you will want to manage kind of your data in your own way. For any of the applications, you can also manage it on a application basis, right? The GDPR status or the criticality, and store the contracts and information. We also have a contract concierge that can help automatically pull in this data if you need it. I'm happy to touch on that in the questions. One of the pieces that I'd say really sets Intello apart in this emerging kind of category is what we're doing on that compliance and security side. including pulling in all the third-party applications that have auth permissions into your G Suite, Slack, Office 365, Dropbox accounts, right? Like all those different core applications that store some of your most sensitive data. What are the connected apps to them? So let's take an example. Let's say, let's see what would be a good example here. Let's take Trello, right? So Trello is marked unapproved, and I'll just pick on myself, and you can also see kind of it's related to Atlassian. It's an Atlassian product. But let's go through like Trello specific permission. You can see all of our Google users are actually low risk. Why are they low risk? It's because if you look at the underlying permissions, our security team has hard coded those permissions as low risk integrations. If they were high risk and they weren't accepted, you can always revoke permissions here. But most importantly, you can keep track of your own security state. However, we also pull it in from Slack. And the reason this is high risk is you can see, naming and shaming myself, Barack here, right? Like all the different permissions. For example, that it can search our workplace content, that it can send messages as you within Slack, right? And being able to surface this from a shadow IT sprawl footprint is really important to be able to make educated decisions as to where is your compliance risk and how do you solve for it. There's a lot of other pieces of data that you can pull in, and again, I'm just keeping it short for time sake. But from a spend perspective, you can run different reports based off teams or departments. If you use NetSuite, we can even pull in the cost centers for you, so you can look at automatically the spend based off cost centers. You can see the underlying payment data and the actual memo fields associated with them and any of those payment details. This, you can also run a report here, let's say to source just the Expensify spend or just the Concur spend, or whether it's a bill or an expense. So you can start to try to nail down all that shadow IT that might be purchased and identify who is the user that's expensing that software in Concur or in Expensify or whatever you might be using. Where Intello gets even more powerful is around just automated insights. So we have suggested workflows. And again, if you're a new client kind of watching this, and if you're watching this in the future, this is October 2nd, 2020. We move quickly and launch a lot of products. So this may not be even up to date by the time you're watching this. But anyway, you can see a lot of these suggested filters, a lot of those terminated user reports. You can see whether it's a suggested filter based on governance and compliance or based on license optimization or something else. You can run any of your own filters and fields based on any data or attribute, but these are just suggested ones. And then you can create those workflows and get those workflow alerts via Slack or via email related to, let's say, I want every day at 9 a.m., all of our users that are live in Zendesk but are not live in Okta. Or I want to get a report when any of the license count fields for any of our vendors is empty every week at 12 p.m. And I want that alert sent to Josh and to Colin, and a list of all of those vendors that don't have license counts or any new vendors that essentially were found would be there. You can do it for security reviews or anything else. So there's a lot of ways that you can start to go deeper into this data, that you can build different reports based off of it, different visualizations. But our goal at Intello is to, as seamlessly as possible, pull in as much data as possible to then help you make decisions related to SaaS management. I guess just to end things off, we're working with companies like you all in terms of focus. We really only work with SaaS first organizations. So, and that's by no means like an offense to anyone that might be currently at a job that's not, where your tech stack is mostly on-prem or legacy based. It's just, we're trying to solve the problems of tomorrow, not just the problems of today. And that's how we're able to build what we build and how we think about it. I think that's all I got. Josh is here and he gets to see his colleague's beautiful face, but I can touch on anything else that you guys want.
Well, this is brilliant. Thank you, Barack, for the demo. And as you said at the end, this isn't something that should be discounted by companies that currently have an on-premise infrastructure, because obviously, as we know and as we've discussed over the last few months, 2020 and COVID has expanded people's adoption to SaaS-based applications, whether it's G Suite, Office 365. On-premise is a dinosaur nowadays, and I think people are rapidly moving and adopting the cloud. Those barriers are disappearing, so it's good to have an array of tools to manage it. So we'll open up the questions, and then we can always dive back into the platform if anybody needs to see anything.
Yeah, I think I'll kick it off.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Doc. Coming from my side, as a customer myself, in my previous life, it's interesting to see how you expose and surface a lot of this data. What I would also like to know or see, in case you didn't show it, are you able to also look at redundant application use? So if I have redundant apps like Google Drive, I'm also using Box, I'm using Dropbox, I'm using OneDrive, I'm using SharePoint, right? There's all these redundancies around these file sharing platforms. As an example, are you able to filter or expose those redundant applications and then see where I can start to save my money, put that money back in my pocket and spend it on Amazon Prime stuff?
Yeah, great question, Chris, and thank you for asking the question. So I kind of touched on this briefly, but we do have an auto categorization for each vendor based off of, so we have a vendor database of 50,000 known software companies and some light categorization. However, what we actually found is that it's kind of not enough, and it really is never enough to get like an automated categorization into your product. So just a little preview, but I'm also mindful that this is recorded, so I'm just going to do it kind of relatively quickly. One of the things that we're working on is the ability to actually manually track and assess where your redundancies lie, because as you've probably seen your experience, Chris, is like, one side of it is seeing, okay, they're in the same category. The other side of it is like, okay, yeah, we actually do have this reason for 8 project management solutions. Like,
right,
we kind of need 8 different project management solutions, even if Smartsheet is primary. But we definitely don't want Trello, right? Like, we're okay with Smartsheet, and if you're saying Jira's project management, sure, but our engineers need that. And you're saying Airtable is there and Google Docs, great. But we definitely are not okay with Trello because they don't have X security or have never gone through that policy. So this is kind of a newer report that we're working on. We do some light categorization, and then every client gets a dedicated client success manager that helps with auto creating these reports and going deeper in terms of what can you consolidate, and trying to really just be like an extension to your teams to drive value.
No, I think that's great. I think that's the right move, because trying to understand not just your footprint around these shadow IT applications, like all of these things are siloed off because, marketing's got their tools, legal has their tools, and they're very, they're honed in on those things. Those are their favorite apps they want to use, but there might not be a business validation, or there may be security issues that are surfaced from things like this. So I think it's important to call out, how you manage that type of like mapping convention. The other question I had, you mentioned like the reporting on here looks incredible. Is there any scheduled reporting? So if I wanted to get something like every 30 days, send this to my chief financial officer so he doesn't get, too upset with me on swiping the credit card too many times?
Yeah, absolutely. So the workflows that I was showing you, we can even kind of go through it. We built it. Oh, I forgot that I'm not screen sharing anymore. Give me a second.
You're good.
They can be fully customized based on different data or attributes, including, let's say renewals or anything else. So when you actually go through creating a workflow or seeing how the workflows are created, we will pull in the users automatically. Let's say if you're doing it via Slack, so you can then just search for, Chris or whoever it might be, and we don't have a matching user because you don't work with us, but you'll be able to see those users and then create the reports and set when they actually get those reports and what fields you're kind of building the data off of. So everything that you saw in that vendor table and that kind of spreadsheet killer view, and anything that you've seen that we're pulling it automatically from the integrations, you can create custom workflows based off of, and then trigger those workflows to go out to whoever they need to go out at, whatever frequency they need to go out to them.
Perfect. Makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate that.
No problem.
On the topic of the spreadsheet killer, do you have BigQuery import/export functions?
Yes. On basically every view, we have export. So let's talk about export first. So you can see this beautiful export to CSV button. And if we went through most of the pages, you can see that it's there on both individual applications.
That automatically to BigQuery.
In terms of like pushing the
data to BigQuery,
it wouldn't. There's no automated kind of like workflow from a CSV to pull or push on a regular frequency. So you would still have to kind of be in the middle, like downloading, uploading. From an import perspective, we can do the same. So we can import any data that would go into that spreadsheet killer view. We do that for every client as part of onboarding. And then if theoretically and hopefully the data is then updated and maintained in Intello as source of truth, but if for some reason it's not, we can always keep kind of running those CSV imports.
Related to that topic, before we move on, I just wanted to ask, when you're doing the imports, I assume that's like a bulk update feature. Are there some fields that can't be updated?
All fields can be updated as part of the bulk import. It's based off of a column matching rows. So just making sure that the columns and the fields that you have set up in Intello match with the columns in the spreadsheet. And if there are examples that aren't, we get an error. We kind of report back to you and ask, do you want to create this field and have it stored? Or should this be mapped to a different field? So all the data can go in from CSV import.
I love the fact that you've got export to CSV on every single page. I think that should be the industry standard, because it's amazing how many other applications or even G Suite, I needed to get a list of all of my Google shared drives, and you go to the page and there's no export, list button. I think that's really good. You've added that from the start. I have a question. Going at the beginning, you said about a company were cautious about adding the integration of their finance application into Intello. How do you address that, and how do you ensure the security of the finance system and the data you're pulling in?
Great question. So as you're alluding to, there's sometimes more sensitivity around financial integrations. And I'd say even more so than the obvious fact that it's your financial system, which immediately puts things in just a different mindset and perspective. It's actually often because IT might not be the admins of those underlying systems. So even to get those financial integrations set up, it requires a conversation or two and kind of buy-in. So that's just the first thing to note that usually does happen, right? So if you were interested in Intello, I would just think about, what are you currently the admin for? What are you not the admin for? Who do you need to loop in into that evaluation? And who also do you need to loop in terms of like the value? But that wasn't your question, Colin. Your question was around the security of our financial integrations. We have many publicly traded clients at this point. We've been through the ringer from a security perspective. And from day one, we recognize the sensitivity around any integration, including the financial integrations, but also I'd say G Suite, Slack, and other systems that store sensitive data for you guys, and build it in a way that's really security focused and conscious. And what that means is that we limit the data that we pull to only what's absolutely necessary. So for us, that's read-only permissions into certain expenses. Now, on top of that, we've also built a custom, basically a custom rule, we call it rule skipper, rule payment skipper, where it's like, if you say, let's say, Colin, you work in the World Trade Center, and there's a software company, Intello subleases, that might be too confusing, Dropbox subleases from your guys' office. So they pay you on a regular basis. They may show up from our algorithms as software spend for Dropbox, but you actually are going to want to skip that, and you're not going to want to ever surface that, and your finance team might not. So before we even set it up, we can create those rules into the kind of custom of what we pull, even limited to software expenses. How much do you want to limit, and are there any exceptions that you have from a financial and security perspective? And we're really thoughtful around the permissions that we have to only what's absolutely necessary. I'm biased, but I actually think financial systems are often viewed as the most sensitive. I actually don't think they are. I think Slack and email, where you're saying everything that you think about your boss and friends and husbands and wives and spouses and partners and dogs, you don't want your dog letting that get out there and seeing what it's like. So I think those are more sensitive systems, but regardless, we take security pretty seriously. We're SOC 2 certified. We're really thoughtful around how we built it and the permissions that we get.
Great. Any other questions from our panel?
Yeah, I've got one. So, you know, if we look at users, and a lot of those are coming over as integrations, what if you have a product that maybe doesn't have a direct integration or isn't tied in a single sign-on? How can you assign users to that product?
Good question. So the data out from Cintello is only as good as the data in, which I think is implied in what you're asking, Chris. And if it's coming from a direct integration or coming from a single sign-on, I think that's more or less intuitive to many of you as kind of IT, how we can assign that to a user and how we can actually surface it. Outside of that, the way that we're doing that is through G Suite authentications or Office 365 authentications. We have a browser extension as well, but the browser extension really is usually not the right way to do it. But we assign every user based on their email. You cannot create users in Cintello or custom assign them to applications. That part of our system is all automated. So there shouldn't be a reason why we wouldn't capture a user, because we should be integrating with the sources of truth for all users and both employees and contractors, and they should be in there. But the second example that you gave in terms of like custom assigning them to applications that we may not have seen, we've heard once or twice. We just don't usually see that at scale. Sometimes for some smaller companies that's manageable to kind of like assign them and to track on an individual employee basis. We have different ways to do it on a team and department basis to assign those custom to applications, but not on an employee level. So it's not something that you could currently do in Cintello. It's not really something that we've had too many requests for, to be honest with you, Chris.
So I'm asking a reseller question now. We have often enough that now that you integrate with financial services and financial systems, we often bundle like 5, 6, 7 different tools on one invoice. How do you handle that?
Great question. It goes back to that custom rules engine parser. So every single client purchases software through resellers. It could be your firm, Dominic, or it can be, the SHIs and CDWs of the world. And what we do is, as part of the onboarding, try to learn just upfront, what are the software expenses that are being purchased, and who are they getting purchased by, so we can customize like where we're pulling it from. But the ability to do it automatically, let's say, you're paying on a monthly basis for 5 applications and you're bundling that together. The only way we're able to get the details of like, these are 5 different applications and what those applications are, is if they're stored somewhere where we're pulling in the data automatically. And so for some of our clients, especially the larger ones, they are doing that. They're doing that in NetSuite through memo fields. Sometimes it's even automated inadvertently, just the way that it's actually coded. But if it's really just kind of added up and then put into the financial system as one bulk expense, usually what our clients do is they'll actually manage that reseller as a vendor and then break it out on their own to be able to track it. So the data out is really only as good as data in. Sometimes that full data from resellers is not always available, and we do everything we can to pull it automatically. And if we can't, we help create the workarounds needed to still track it accurately.
Good. Follow-up question. How can we do this better? How can we help you?
The best way is really to help the finance teams on your clients, which is, IT is often actually frustrated by this because they're often one step removed. But when you're purchasing a lot of software and you're doing it at bulk, your finance team is just constantly coding expenses and applications, and it's really tedious manual work if it's not fully automated. So to the extent when you're actually charging it back to the client, you're working with them to make sure that they have the information they need to break it out into their system, because ideally, from a financial perspective, that's really the only way you can report on it, right? Like Intel is pulling it from the financial systems that are the client's reporting. So the best way to enable us is to work with your clients to figure out how do you code expenses and how do you want the details for your products so that you can budget accordingly. Not just think of us as a reseller, but realize that we're part of purchasing 5 essential tools for you, and here are the 5 essential tools and how we do it. Does that answer your question?
Working with the financial team, trying to get them to understand, or to get us to help us to understand what they need to make it as easy as possible for them.
Exactly.
I have a question. So if you've been in the SaaSOps world at all, you know that there are actually a lot of tools that do very similar things to Cintello. So Barak, I wonder if you can explain what makes Cintello different than some of your competitors, what makes you better, why we should.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So when my co-founder and I started working on Cintello just about 4 years ago, there were no players in the space. And over the last really 3 years, it's become very much an emerging category. And for many of you that are SaaSOps leaders that have titles related to SaaSOps, that have been part of all the communities and channels, like you've gotten into cold emails, you've seen the posting in different channels, and it might even feel noisy at times. There's really it's like us and maybe 3 or 4 others that we truly compete with, right? I'm not putting BetterCloud in there because I do view it as complementary, and I'm not putting some others out of those, and all those companies weren't around 3.5 years ago, right? So it's emerging, and so the one thing to note, kind of when I speak to differentiation, is that it is always changing a little bit. But the part that we think about that doesn't change is how you align your roadmap and your priorities. So from a feature and functionality and checkbox perspective, there's things that we do better, and there's probably things that our competitors do better. And honestly, like, we launch functionality every week, and I'm sure some of those competitors do too, since they're startups themselves. So rather than talk about the features, I'll talk about it at more high level. And at a high level, the biggest thing that sets Cintello apart is that it's product-led, built for IT. Right? It's product-led, really built at the center of thinking of SaaSOps at the center as IT, with, of course, procurement taking a huge piece of this, and of course, security and InfoSec, and maybe they're even leading the search in some ways. But the focus on IT from the very beginning has entered into our ethos in terms of how we operate as a company, how we build it to enable that really quick time to value and ease of use from an integration perspective, and also how we think about SaaS management as a holistic challenge, right? As I mentioned earlier, and Colin, before it was recorded, kind of alluded to kind of the spend management category. We don't view ourselves as spend management. Yeah, a part of what we do is spend management, and we can help you with your spend management challenges. But it's call it a third of how we think about our roadmap and alignment and functionality. So without kind of comparing and contrasting feature by feature, it has to do with what your challenges are. And if your challenges are more than spend oriented, you find yourself doing a lot of projects related to SaaS security and compliance. You find yourself trying to build workflows to enable employees and automate like request and access to applications. That's how we think about things, and that's how we position. But if you really need to go deep and spend, and really what you care about is spend, it's not secure and enable, there might be, one of our competitors might actually be the better solution for you. I don't want to say that for certain. It depends on your team and your integrations, but it's possible, because what sets us apart is product led with, without that hand holding and services, and crazy costly services and long implementations. And we're also built for kind of IT at the center of that SWAT team.
Great, thank you. We're coming up to, I think, 40 minutes in. We have time for a few more questions, and then we can give our thoughts. But as you said, Barak, it is an expanding market, and I know I have received a lot of cold emails from other companies, and I'm sure all my colleagues have here. And it's interesting that some of them are established players that have other products, and the sort of this area is new to them. To some individual developers, I've been contacted by one company, and it's just one guy who's developing this sort of spend management. And there is, I think, starting to be a differentiation between just spend license management into the full life cycle, and adding more features. The one, if anybody else doesn't have a question, I have a question, possibly maybe a last one. No?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
What's coming in the next year or so for your
That was
platform.
my question.
Was it? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I think that that's a huge validation. So thank you, Alex, for asking the question. Thank you, Colin, for thinking of the same one, because it goes back to Rose's question around differentiation, right? Like we can spend an hour talking about feature by feature and which platform, but aligning based off where, especially considering the category is 3 years old, making sure that you're aligning with the right partner that's going to continue to solve problems for you and kind of surprise you in the way that they solve problems that you had never even dreamed of that solution doing it for you is how we think about our job and goal is to learn from each one of you on an individual client by client basis and then package that into the product roadmap. So some things that are coming up that might excite you. We recently launched an access control product. So we're already integrating into the actual products and applications. We already surfaced for you from that spend and security and enablement use case, the kind of metadata, what roles and permissions and what department they're in based off of their SSO. We've created essentially I call it a view, right? Like a dashboard for you to actually track all those users and the permissions granted and keep an audit log of when they've been granted those permissions and make sure that they've actually been approved. So that's been a pretty big lift that we've worked with one specific publicly traded client of ours really closely to be able to build. And that's been something that we're really excited about. Another big kind of roadmap oriented release is we want to go deeper on that enablement side. I think that we have ways to kind of improve to just build the right tooling to help you as your companies are growing and to help your employees get access to the right products. And I think there's even a bigger opportunity with this remote world to be able to do that. So one of the releases that's slated for later this year is SaaS catalog for your employees to be able to search through the approved applications. The goal, it might not launch in V1, is to then integrate with Jira or whatever you're using for ticketing to be able to auto create and auto solve tickets when you're creating the licenses to get in front of the shadow IT issue by showing those employees what are those approved applications and ideally showing them the ones that are specific for them based on their role and department and team. So those are two. Alex, I'm happy to take it offline. I'm sensitive to the fact that it's recorded, to be honest with you. But at a high level, those are two really big roadmap related product functionality that we'll be launching in the very near future. One's already launched, one in this quarter.
Yeah, that's exciting. So I take it your development is mainly based off client needs and you're directed by the client.
I mean, anything else would be a huge mistake, in my opinion. It's like you guys know
that's
your problems
why
are
it's a good question to ask. Yeah.
No, you guys know what your problems are better than you do. And Josh, who's on the call, and a few others, our clients that we work with closely and we learn from on a regular basis, and we have regular calls with all of them because all of this is so new. It's we take SaaS for given, especially if you're working at a SaaS first company. But Colin mentioned this at the beginning. A lot of organizations have gotten SaaS first for the first time as a result of COVID, right? Like it's kind of crazy. Like it's the Wild West, this whole like SaaS for all side. So us building in a vacuum is not going to help you. It's not going to help us. And instead, we try to work really closely with our clients, identify their problems and figure out who else is asking those problems and how we can get it onto the roadmap and release it pretty quickly.
Cool.
I have one more question. I don't think we covered pricing. How does your pricing structure work? How much is it?
Pricing. Yeah, for sure. We're transparent about it. You can go to our website. And I know Rose in the past, we were updating this website. It went down for you at one point. So just backing up the fact that, as I promised, we are transparent about it. We price based on the amount of unique users we monitor usage for. So think of like your G Suite licenses or Okta or whatever your source of truth is. And it kind of scales from there. This will be changing soon, and we'll be introducing a second tier. That's not going to be anything that you guys saw today. It's more those larger roadmap related releases that will likely be priced in a second tier. So
is that pricing variable or is it contractual?
The pricing is contractual. So we don't really do kind of true ups mid contract and try to nickel and dime you. Like our goal is more value oriented, and once you're paying for an annual basis that we can work with you. That being said, there is usually a user cap in that contract just to protect against something crazy, right? Like we've had clients go through mega mergers or mega acquisitions and literally double their headcount. And actually, in most of those cases, we still don't ask for more money. We kind of wait until the end of the contract and just make sure.
What about the opposite case? Because you've mentioned COVID a lot. So what about the opposite case where people lay off a lot of employees?
In the opposite case, we don't kind of downgrade and go down mid contract and mid agreement. We haven't really been asked that because most of our contracts are annual, paid up front. So it's not like you're paying monthly, even though it's showing monthly. So it'd be pretty complicated to kind of do like rebates and discounts that way, but it would be acknowledged and refigured out as part of the renewal for sure.
Excellent, great. Well, it is wonderful, Barak, that you are transparent and you have that pricing on your website. Many of the other applications that I've looked at, it's always call for a quote, contact the sales department. Being upfront, I think personally does allow somebody to bet, I guess, evaluate it, whether it's even a product that they have the budget for, or it's something they can have in their portfolio before they start doing a demo. I think that really does help, so I will commend you on that personally. Let's do a quick, we've got about another 5-10 minutes. Let's do a quick round robin. We'll do it in alphabetical by first name because I don't know everybody's last name, of what their thoughts are. Is there a need? Could you see yourself using it? Well, start with Alex because you're top of the alphabet.
So just to be clear, there is no month to month. It's all annual plus contract based.
That's correct. We used to have month to month, but we don't anymore. It's all annual
just
contract
because
based.
people would sign up, pay for a month, get all the information, and drop it? Is that
it would honestly, it had more to do with kind of like back end management
Financial,
and like making sure clients like actually commit like to
budgeting,
be able to like work together to get the insights. But if you ever get a chance to experience it, you'll see like we used to at the very beginning of Intel get a lot of pushback. Oh, but I'll do this once as an audit, and then why do I need you guys? That's literally never happened. Literally never happened because this is a real time problem, and the way that you use those insights and where you store the data and source of truth is different. So it wasn't your direct question, but it was kind of implied there around the audit. That's not why we do the annual contract. It's for different reasons.
Okay. Yeah. I'd say there's a lot of value there. I don't think our GL is a SaaS product currently, so I don't know if we would be able to leverage that, but hopefully in the near future be something I'd look at.
I was going to go to Caleb, but I think Caleb had to drop. I will certainly say that this is an application market or area that we're looking at. Certainly there is a need to have that cross-platform view of all of your costs, all of your licenses, and the usage as well. Having a central repository for where all of your usage data is, and auditing data, I think is very useful. Chris?
Which one? I'll go. I would say, 100%. I mean, like you said, we're all SaaS leaders on this call. Digital transformation is a real thing. It's been a thing for a while. And so I think being able to solve a complex problem with an easy to use interface and just be like, here's the proof. Proof is in the product. Show me where I can save money. It's absolutely relevant for the conversation.
We completely skipped the B's. Brian, I forgot you down there at the bottom of my screen.
Can I ambush Barak for a second?
Bring it on, Brian. What's up, man?
What's going on, brother? I'm already a customer, and I've put. I'm also a major clown and a troublemaker, and so I put Barak and his team through the paces quite regularly. I am not a plant. I'm going to say up front, Barak didn't ask me to join this. I came in out of nowhere, but I will go to town and say that his service team, the product, has been a lifesaver. My company. I'm scared to say what my company is because I'm just going to talk a bunch of crap right now. My company has like an army of shadow IT people all over the place. No, it's legit. I mean, we've tried to empower each department to solve their own problems and help the business grow, and we all understand that. But what ends up happening is if there's not enough communication within all these teams to stay coordinated, we get SaaS products all over the place, and sometimes that's hard to keep track of. And what's worse is sometimes we have 2 or 3 different products that do the same thing. And so this tool is exactly the tool to help catch that, find it, and put the evidence in front of all these other teams saying, no, your team is using this. I have the evidence right here. It's coming from our IDP. It's coming from our spend programs. Intello isn't making this up. They're the ones finding it. So I just wanted to go to town and say, like, it's been the biggest help for our company for sure. And I'm recruiting an army of people to get into Intello on our side to continue using it. So yeah, just wanted to say, yeah, I love it. It's great.
Thank you.
Brian, thank you so much.
Chris,
Thanks, Brian.
It helps if I mute myself. Actually, so as we've kind of talked about in here, I recently changed roles, but in my last role, we were actually very, very close to pulling the trigger on Intello. I do think it's a very solid product. I hope they still do, actually. It's a great fit. Especially we were an Office 365 organization, and I bring that up because Intello is a stronger product in that world than some of the other ones we looked at. And I think that's worth mentioning. And I think, if we were to have my own software company, our own software companies, it would definitely be one I would be putting at the short list of explore and deep dive a little farther.
Colin, you are muted.
Rookie mistake. I was going to say, I know a couple of people probably have to drop. Felipe did put in chat that he would give it his 2 thumbs up. Dominic, do you want to give a bit of feedback?
Sure. So, well, internally we have 5 people, so that's going to be a huge expense to buy that per person. That's more than £5 or dollars. But we have a couple of customers where we are actually looking actively in those management tools and or starting to look actually. So yeah, some Intello is always shortlisted on that in that part. Yeah, and not just for the overview of what, but also why and where. Who paid for it and why?
Okay, cool. All right, Josh and Rose, we're running over time.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a little bit biased as a customer, but I mean, I would definitely say that. I'll put it this way: I was very, very, very fond of and very proud of the spreadsheet that I had created for my 300 applications, my 300 SaaS applications spanning across the entire organization of over 1,600 people. And the import and now the management within Intello has been mind-blowingly easy. I think the biggest concern that I had was that what Brian said is that, we have these multiple instances of the same application, not even just the same use case, but the same application across there, and being able to actually discover things like that. But also the support has been amazing. And that's really, especially with a company that touts kind of this AI and this algorithm that goes through and pulls this information. It's like, okay, well, that's great. But when it screws up, or when something goes wrong with it, or I have the wrong data, what happens? And their support model, their response time, how they actually work with the customers has been top notch. So I mean, I'm a big thumbs up.
Final words from Rose.
Thank you.
So I'll say I've engaged with Intello a couple of times on potentially purchasing, and we to date have not purchased in any of those engagements. But I will say Intello is one of the only companies that I've ever worked with where I gave them feedback as part of the evaluation, and I eventually saw that feedback incorporated into the product. I actually saw that today from the last time that we engaged. I saw some improvements. So I don't know if that's a coincidence, but I'm going to assume it's not, and be a little bit narcissistic. But So that's something that I really appreciate about a SaaS company, and I think it's really important to listen to your users and to really show that you're listening to your users. And so I value that.
I can relate. I can relate to your comment. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I super value that. I think, Barak's comments about how, if you're looking for certain things, like this may not be the product for you, but if you're really looking for something very holistic and definitely, part of that full workflow, not just like spend or discover, like, really looking to engage with these, I think, Intello would be the tool that I chose in like my own organization.
I want to circle back real quick on that, on the Barak mentioned early on that they move quickly, and when I was evaluating this a month ago, email notifications weren't a thing. It was only Slack, and we were not a Slack organization, so it was like, oh, okay, that's coming, that's great, but when? And to hear now, it's been a couple of weeks, and there it is. That's awesome.
That is all very great feedback, and yes, it is great when there is that open dialogue between the user, the end user, and the supplier. So that's great that everything is. You have that community, Barak, for Intello, and a good source of ideas and features to be added. Well, thank you very much for your time and everybody else's time. Thank you very much for those that have watched. Obviously, what should they do if they're interested in Intello, Barak?
If you send me an email, Barak@Intello.io, I'll follow up with the purchase order and then the wiring information. No, you can look at our website, Intello.io, or reach out to me personally. I'm happy to give you a demo personally myself, or introduce you to one of our colleagues on the sales side.
Or at Barak in Better IT, right?
Or at Barak in Better IT, or in SASE, or Mac Admins, or wherever the community you live in on a daily basis. I hopefully have an account there, and if I don't, let me know in one of the other ones that I should join. So yeah, you'll find me, and all these people on the call, and anyone that you're seeing watching, just ask through a friend, and hopefully Barak@Intello.io if you want to reach out to me personally.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thanks for the clients that joined, and even the people that aren't clients but went through evaluations, like Chris and Rose, and sharing positive things. So thank you everyone for including us, and thank you for all the kind words.